Yeah, so this is an interesting question here because we're trying to find the largest of either a 200 or a 55 period ATR. Whichever period ATR has the most volatility in it. That's what we want to use for a stop loss. So actually, it's a stop loss, not a stop entry. I don't actually have an answer off the top of my head because, stop losses, but their nature is designed to get tighter and tighter and tighter to wherever the market is trading. They're designed to lock in more profits and minimize losses. So they're always tightening. But I think we can do it. So this question, I'll kind of go over again the various settings that you can disable so that a stop loss can move backwards. Let's say. Let's get the strategy loaded onto the chart. All right, so from the strategies window here, let's open up the shark indicators. There's BlackBird. And don't forget to enable your strategy. Give this a moment to load up. So the first time you load up BlackBird, the first time during the entire session of NinjaTrader, it does take a little longer than after that. BlackBird will load up very quickly after the initial loading of one of the BlackBirds. So, all right, let's see. Next, let's open up the order settings window here. Okay. And to start setting up your orders here, we need to start with the entry order first. So I'll just use a market entry since that's not what the question's about. So the question is about our stop loss. So I will start with just a regular ATR stop loss. And let's see here. So I'm going to have to start off, right? So the initial placement, you just have to start with something. You have to pick something to start with. So there's no decision-making tree for the initial placement here. So you just arbitrarily pick, either a 200 period ATR or a 55 period ATR. Right, just kind of whichever one you think might be more volatile. And my guess would be the 55, the shorter period, is probably going to be more volatile, especially if you're trading in regular RTH, right, regular trading hours, right, because the markets are typically more volatile during the trading hours than they are in the overnight session. All right, so we'll go down here. All right, so in the offset section, we'll see we're using an ATR 20 period. So we'll open this up and we'll adjust the period to 55. There we go. All right, so we just picked one of the ATR periods for the initial placement. So, and then next step would be to switch over to the trailing actions, and we do need to enable it. So let's set it to custom, and then we'll add a trailing rule. And so what's going to determine the largest or the biggest distance between the, let me back up here. So we're going to have two trailing rules here, right? So one trailing rule is going to try and use the 55 period ATR, and the other trailing rule is going to use the 200 period ATR. And then which trailing rule is actually used by BlackBird is determined by the evaluation mode here, right? So we can see typically it's, whichever action will bring the stop loss closest to price, right, to the market price, right? And what's the action here? Well, that's referring to the action column. All right, so the action column, so this is the column that actually sets the price. That's what determines the new price for your stop loss or for your order, right? So the action column is what calculates the price. So when we look at the evaluate, basically action is another way of saying, the calculated price. So for all the trailing rolls, whichever trailing roll's calculated price, will bring the stop loss closest to the market price. So whichever trailing roll calculates the closest price to the market is the trailing roll that gets used, right? That gets fired off, and the other trailing rolls are just ignored. So and so we also have this action furthest from price, right? Now this, once you set this mode, right, it stays that way. So so this is kind of what, this is what I was trying to think of how to, kind of get past this, right? So we can answer the question simply by setting the evaluate to furthest from price, right? And so whichever our trailing rolls, will move the stop loss, will calculate a price that's furthest from price. That's the trailing roll that will get used. So let's see here. So let's kind of actually put something in here, right? So that'll be the 200 period ATR, and this one down here will be the 55 period ATR. So next we just go into the action column here, and we're going to open up the move to, and we want to create an offset, right? Your stop losses are offset from the entry price. So we'll set the entry price there. And then down here for the indicator, right, let's go find our ATR. There's our ATR. And we said this first one here is going to be the 200 period ATR, right? And I don't know what the multiplier is of the ATR. So again, I'll just leave it as a 1.5 there. All right, so we set up the 200 period. All right, so this action will calculate the 200 period ATR, and then this next trailing roll down here, we'll set this one up basically the exact same way. So we want to select the entry price first, and then go down here into the offset section and set the ATR again. And then this time we'll put in the 55 period, like so. Oh, and let's not forget to set the same multiplier. There you go, a 1.5 multiplier. And one other thing here is we need to change the allow movement. So let's see here. I guess we'll just allow movement in both directions. So I need to open up the other trailing roll, or the other trailing roll's action, and also adjust the allow movement to both directions. So that is how, we would set up both of the trailing rolls, right? So kind of simplify what we've done, we've set up one trailing roll that's going to calculate the 200 period ATR, and it'll calculate what the stop loss offset price will be for that 200 period ATR. And then the other trailing roll, right, it's doing the same thing. It's calculating an offset price, but using a 55 period. And the evaluate using, right, it's set to furthest from price. So whichever one of these trailing rolls is going to move that stop loss furthest from price is the one that will get used. All right, so there's one other thing that we need to disable to allow stop losses to go backwards, right? So the first thing that we had to do is remember the allow movement. So we had to set the allow movement to both directions or use against direction only. Right, so there's that. So in the action, we had to change that allow movement. But then also in risk management, right, since you are deliberately wanting to use your stop loss in its non-traditional way, right, you're modifying your risk. You're wanting to increase your risk, right? So we need to go into the risk management and we need to enable allowing the widening up your stop loss. All right. In other words, widening your stop loss means moving your stop loss further away from price, right? Increasing your risk. So there we go. So we need to enable that. And then again, in your action, use the allowed movement as well. Adjust that as well. So those are the two things that are required to move a stop loss backwards, right? So so what'll happen is the stop loss, right? It gets placed, right? The stop loss gets placed using either your 55 period or your 200 period, whichever one you want to choose, whichever one you kind of guesstimate is going to be the larger, and then once the stop loss is placed, BlackBird will then evaluate these two trading rolls, and it will figure out if the other one was larger, had a larger offset distance, and then move that stop loss out based on that. Now, if you want to, that's the easy part, right? So we managed to be able to just throw that stop loss further out, based on whatever creates the widest stop loss based on our two ATR periods. But now what happens if you want to start trailing it at some point? So that can be done, but you have to be very mindful of this evaluate using, right? Because it's always going to try and keep your stop loss furthest from price, right? So it makes it because of this main operational mode, right? It's going to make it tougher to tighten your stop loss up. But the good thing is that, right, this 200 rule, this 200 ATR and 55 ATR rule, they only will execute one time, right? Their repeat is set to one time here. And maybe so there's another thing to understand. So this repeat, so each rule can activate itself one time. And then once these rules, each rule once it's been evaluated and used one time, then it can no longer be used, right? Because the repeat is set to once. The repeat set to none. So So let's walk through the various scenarios, right? So your position is opened, right? So the initial placement fires off, right, at the 55 ATR. And then BlackBird goes in here and says, and evaluates, right, both of these trailing rolls, and it's determined that the 200 period ATR, right, will actually calculate a stop loss further away. So the 200 ATR trailing roll, it gets activated, right? It fires off. So its repeat is used up, right? It fired off once, and now this trailing roll will never get used again, right? Because its repeat is set to none. So this trailing roll is never going to be able to repeat itself, or basically it's never going to be able to fire off again or execute again. But our 55 ATR, right? It hasn't executed yet, so it still has one execution left in there, right? So it could execute. Yeah, it could execute itself sometime, further on throughout the trade. Yeah, so I'm trying to see if there's a way here, if maybe this repeat until, maybe there's a repeat until, or maybe there's a repeat until that would prevent, right, the other trailing roll from executing. So I guess a simple way of saying it is, we'd only, if we could set a way so that these two trailing rolls can only execute right on the first bar, only on the first bar. And as soon as that first bar passes, then these trailing rolls can no longer execute anymore. So kind of disabling them after the first bar, and they just become benign. So that way these trailing rolls they get limited so that they pretty much only act as a initial placement in that initial placement period. So let me just take a look through the repeat until and see if there's a way to disable that. Here we go. The timer bars. This should do it here. Yeah, this will do it. So, we can set a time limit here. I would probably increase this up to 2 seconds just in case. Because you never know how complex you might use this stop loss trailing roll. With. If you're using bloodhound signals, your bloodhound might take some time to calculate. If you have some other stop loss rules in here that are also being evaluated by BlackBird, profit target, you never know, you might have a some kind of adjusting profit target going on. There might be some money management rules that also need to be evaluated, things like that, right? There's a whole bunch of other stuff that might be evaluated. So I would probably increase this time to 2 seconds or, maybe 3 seconds. Who cares? Maybe even 5 seconds. If your stop loss, goes from the 200 to the 55, if the other trailing roll, fires off within 5 seconds, it's probably no big deal. So we'll set something like that. So basically, what we're doing is we're saying each of these trailing rolls can repeat, until, 5x number of seconds are up. So once X number of seconds are up, then this rule can't repeat anymore. Yeah, and just in case, we'll also set the repeat every, to 1 second. Yeah, so basically these rules can kind of evaluate themselves, 5 times. Yeah, well, actually, this probably just knock this down to 3 seconds. So we'll give it, each of these rules basically 3 seconds to try and push that stop loss out, to the larger, right, of the 200 or the 55 period ATR. So let's adjust both of these here. Okay, that should do it. And then, if we wanted to, we could then add another trailing rule here. So at this point, if you wanted to create some trailing rules, that's gonna actually literally trail the stop loss, right? Because keep in mind that this 200 period and this 55 period isn't actually trailing. It's just, it's actually a workaround to the initial placement, right? Yeah. So those first 2 trailing rules, and another way of saying is that they're just kind of a workaround for this initial placement to try and figure out, which is the larger stop loss distance on the initial placement. And then if you actually want to start doing some real trailing afterwards, so say for something like, all right, so we want to, wait for, X amount of profit. So I'll just say 10 ticks, something simple and standardized. So after X amount of profit, now we'll start trailing that stop loss. And just to keep with the theme, I'll use an ATR. But now at this point, you're just going to have to decide on a fixed ATR period for that. So if you want to keep, so I'll just say a 55 period, right? So if you want to, if you're wanting to really stick with the larger ATR offset distance, between a 200 and a 55 period, well, at that point you would need to build yourself a custom indicator, right? That's going to do its own internal evaluation and figure out, which period actually creates the largest distance, right? Whether the 200 period or 55 period creates a larger, range. So if you want to still keep evaluating the 200 or 55 period ATR, at this point for actual trailing, you'll need a custom indicator. But for now, just to follow through on this example, I'll just choose the ATR 55 period, and then just set whatever your offset is to be. So I'll just keep it at a standard 1.5 offset there. So, and this time, this allowed movement, if we're wanting this trailing rule to actually, tighten up your stop loss, and we want to make sure that the allowed movement is with the direction, right, with the direction of the trade only. So that way, this means, right, the stop loss is only going to move with the direction of the trade. So if your trade is a long trade, right, then the stop loss can only move long, move upwards, right, with the direction of the trade. So, and then we need to come down here to repeat, right, and set this to repeat indefinitely, right? And so now this trailing rule can keep moving, once per bar. Yeah. So there we go. I think that pretty much, covers everything I can kind of think of. All right. Well, I'll leave it at that. So with that, gentlemen, have a good weekend, and I hope you guys will have some questions for me next week. All right, guys, have a good weekend, and I hope to see you guys next week in the workshops. Bye-bye.